Welcome everyone. How's everyone today? I'm here with Mr. Joan Torrents. He's in the UK. And Joan, welcome to the Strategy Factory. How are you?
I'm very well. Good to see you, Lucas. Now looking forward to
Yeah,
talking to you. That's great.
I'm really excited about this conversation. Where are you for everyone that might be catching the Strategy Factory for the first time? My name is Lucas. I'm in Sydney, Australia, and I connect with top leaders from around the world to get to know more about their vision on strategy and what they think strategy is and how they make strategy happen. So, Joan, where in the UK are you? And for those that don't know you, who is Joan Torrents?
So I'm in Cambridge in UK, and just to define myself, I think probably the best way to say this, I'm someone who has learned to enjoy change. So I grew up in a family in Spain, in a retail environment where everything was laid out in front of me in terms of my career, the business, and pretty much who should just meet and marry, and that's it, your life until retirement. But at some point found my love in London. So back then my girlfriend and now my wife. So one day I decided to pack my luggage, come to London with no job and pretty much not much money, and start my new life. And since then, my life has been full of up and downs and a lot of changes. But actually, I learned how to sort of not improvise, but just be prepared to have a plan A, B, C, and D, and I just enjoy change. And actually, now I just like the spark of, okay, what's new? What should I do now? What should I try? So it's quite addictive once to get used to it.
That is wonderful. And you've had a long career. You've been in different industries. You've been in the wine industry for a long time. Now, while having this conversation, you've been working for Tesco for a long time. What is your role there?
So with Tesco, working as a global sourcing manager. So my work is involving liaising with different hubs around the world and just really gel different teams together. So Tesco being a global player in terms of sourcing and having stores in different parts of the world, mainly in the UK, but also in Ireland and Central Europe. There's a big teams in different locations, different cultures, and just really when we face the challenges of supply, of factories, of trying to find the best supplier for our customers, we need to get a team effort and just getting different teams that are located worldwide. It's more difficult than ever. So my part of my role is do that. And initially, I joined them to manage the Brexit risk mitigation, which was a big thing here happening in the UK, as most people have heard. And it was a really good experience, actually. Yeah.
That's great. And I'm definitely going to go back to that. I really want to talk about how Brexit affected, obviously, Tesco and the industries in general. But you've been talking about yourself as a guy with vision, obviously with a lot of experience. How would you say you can apply that vision and that experience of your life in achieving success for you, for the companies that you work for, and for your teams?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, as a personal success, I think most of us can be very good at it. It's just simply like, okay, I'm just going to get it done. And you put the time, you put the effort, and people are just really brilliant at achieving that. When it comes to the teams, I think that is when you need to have a bit more kind of preparation in that respect. And in my case, when it comes to just work with the teams, what I bring there is that reassurance that whenever we face a new project, a new challenge, or a new task, there's always going to be a degree of possible failure. There's going to be a success, but also failure. And it's just create that climate of collaboration saying, look, guys, I have been in choppy waters before. Sometimes went well, sometimes not well, but let's try to do it together. And that have kind of that bit of a safety net that doesn't exist, obviously, but say, look, just let's go through it. And I found that helps a lot.
Let's see what happens. We should all be prepared together.
Yes.
And we're all in this together, as the song says.
Yes, exactly.
Joan, and the last thing before we head into the Brexit topic, which is something that I'm really curious about. You're a UNESCO prize winner, and you haven't said that yet. Can you share with everyone that's watching a little bit about that prize?
Sure. I mean, this happened, yes, some time ago when I was in Spain, actually, and it was working with a school there, and I was preparing them for go to the university. And at some point, they said, "Look, we have a group of students that we want to teach them about physics and chemistry, but can we find a different way?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" It's like, well, it's something completely different. And I came with a new system of bringing ideas and getting people to trust they can gain and develop skills in an area that for them was like, that's not possible. So I broke a lot of rules in terms of how to get people, how to coach people, how to get people forward. And eventually I published a book about it. And yeah, and I was surprised that UNESCO got them and said, well, you have been shortlisted, and eventually just got the award, which is just fantastic. I mean,
fabulous.
Yeah, I'm very proud of it.
Absolutely fabulous. So I'm going to go back because I also want to see how that relates to culture with your teams, because I'm guessing if you were disruptive enough with this project, how do you apply that? I mean, that thing that got you the prize to your teams nowadays. But let's start with Brexit, and I'd like to call this something like Chapter 1, and this idea of how an externality can disrupt a company or an industry. So, what was the? I'm going to talk about Tesco or the supermarket industry. How was the supermarket industry disrupted or changed with something like Brexit?
Well, the big change, or the main element around Brexit was just before was in place. So it was decided that it would happen, but nobody knew how it would happen. So there were no rules. And, if a company is being told, or an industry is being told, look, in 5 years' time, the CO2 emission is going to be that level. And if you're not at that level, you're out of business. Or your recycling levels needs to be at that level. Or there's a new regulation. And it's going to happen in 1, 2, 5 years' time. You can prepare for it, right? In this case, there was nothing to prepare because nobody knew what would be the shape. And that was the biggest disruption back then. How to prepare when you don't know what you are preparing. Yeah.
That's interesting. And I mean, now that Brexit kind of has started, and it's still, I'm guessing there's a lot of things that still need to be, we need to still figure out as we go along. What do you think were the good and the bad outcomes from Brexit in something like the supermarket industry? What has changed that it's worth sharing?
Well, we'll start with the bad outcomes, which has been really the fine details. So when it comes to a global market where goods come from everywhere to everywhere, importing and exporting, there's quite a lot of safety procedures in terms of logistics, in terms of food standards, in terms of products that were in place from a long time collaboration that suddenly disappear. And there was not enough time to put a replacement in place that would be suitable. So there has been a bit of gaps that suddenly is like, oh, by the way, what happens with this? Okay, we'll figure out. So that has had an impact on the industries in terms of extra cost, in terms of getting things moving and happening, and ultimately for the consumer as well, on a bit of less offering at the beginning. That's the bad. But in terms of good, what what Brexit has brought as a good is a lot of, again, success as a team. So in companies, and that goes back to, for instance, in the case of Tesco, which is my personal experience, going down and thinking, well, we cannot fail, right? So that's a huge pressure. When Brexit happens, we cannot have the empty shelves because that will be a disaster. But we don't know how we're going to do it. But then getting those teams, okay, let's explore from different areas. National working teams that we do with the logistics, with procurement, with technical. And okay, how about this? How about that? And then eventually going through that heap, coming out and say, you know what? We managed to have all the products on the shelves for our customers. We haven't had the disruption. And yeah, there was a lot of effort, but it happened. It just really helps a lot to build the things. So that was one of the good things in that respect.
Of the great outcomes. And
Yes.
and looking forward, do you think that obviously this idea of a more solid and committed team is going to be something that lasts? Do you think there's anything else that will kind of happen, or there's any other benefit looking forward besides this one?
Well, I think as a not a generation, obviously, but as a group of people that have gone through that difficult time of managing that uncertainty back then, those people going forward, if at least one of them are in a team group in 5, 10, 15, 20 years time, they can just go back to that time and say, actually, you know what? Remember that time, it was a bit more difficult than now we went through. So that's fine. So I think that's going to be like planting a seed where then just one grows quicker. And then the rest was actually, yeah, we can grow and get it through.
That's awesome. And obviously we've been talking for, I don't know, some time or a few minutes now, and I can really tell your passion for people. I mean, for every single thing that I've been bringing up, you like to talk about people. So let's move into that. Let's move into culture, this idea of culture. Because you've said how much everything has grown, or your team has grown, or the Tesco team has grown after something like Brexit. And I imagine obviously this happened not only in the supermarket industry, but in many different industries. So when we go to culture, one of the questions that I'd like to ask you is, what do you think defines the culture of an organization?
Well, what the culture of an organization is really defined from the top, from the leaders, in terms of what are their objectives, what are their values, and how do they manage expectations from the external people. So if you are working in a company where the top is thinking only to please either shareholders or to please the media, to please themselves and find a big bonus, and then they compromise on everything else, that's going to cascade down. And that's not the type of company you want to work for. You want to work for companies like the case of Tesco, where yes, there's shareholders, yes, there's external pressure, etc. But the leadership is very much about, let's get the things right. These are our values. We don't compromise on that. And it's a very inclusive culture where you can see going down that people just believe in that. And that's the right culture. But it really fits from the top to the bottom.
That's great. And I think that the first thing that comes to mind after that is, how you then nurture that culture. How do you, it comes from the top down, and I'm guessing a lot is just from seeing the top doing what they do. But how do you keep it alive, or how do you nurture it, especially in this post-pandemic world where I'm guessing you have teams that are now distributed and you're not all working on site as maybe you did before the pandemic? How do you keep that culture alive and that culture real, and your teams involved in that culture?
So the way to do it is a constant feeding. So with managing teams, it's the balance from, first of all, providing the right stretch and saying, okay, that's what we need to achieve for next year. this is how we want to improve. That's a new project we would like to trial and see if we can put in place. So how do you stretch the team and also individually so they can just grow and be better? And very important, balance that with the support. Support to say, look, we're going to go for, this is what I want you to stretch, but tell me where you are. It's a journey. So tell me where you are. And then sometimes some projects cannot happen. I had projects where you're like, well, this we have to stop. It doesn't make any sense. And then when you go back to leadership, if the leadership team say, yes, that's the right decision. Yeah, you look at from every angle. It's correct. You gave it a go, but it's impossible. That team grows, and that's that kind of climate of trust, that climate of just really mutual understanding, and that climate of a bit of pressure to just push forward to grow is all you need.
Oh, that's super interesting. That's great. So I had one question that I wanted to ask you. I don't really know if it kind of hits the nail, but let's go for it, which is, do you think it's all about leadership? I mean, we've been talking about culture in different organizations, but do you think the common denominator for when it comes to culture in a successful company is all about leadership? Do you think that's the common denominator to a great culture in different organizations?
I mean, sometimes the word leadership is a bit overused. It's like, okay, that comes from the leadership team. Is like the gospel of truth. And no, I mean, there's a position in terms of hierarchy that works like that. I think it just works at every single level, how people are themselves personally. Are they at ease? Are they happy, or they are a bit unhappy? And how they just carry on. Productivity happens when the people have the right skills, but also when they are engaged and they are happy. If one of those fail a bit or are not at 100%, productivity is going to start decreasing. And leadership sometimes cannot solve that. That is just, it's an organic matter where it's just global. It's like a single cell, not about, okay, the different layers. It's difficult to implement, but it's possible when it's a constant atmosphere that makes it feel like that.
It's very cool. Then thanks for sharing that. I think a lot of people will love this conversation. And kind of following in this idea of culture, I want to kind of double click in going to the idea of teams, because the first time that we talked, not the first time, but one of the times that we talked, the last time we talked, you said something that really resonated with me, and it was this idea of how to achieve personal growth, but at the same time pushing other people and your team to also achieve personal growth. Can you share more about this idea, which kind of seems obvious, but it's not easy. So how do you get that done?
Well, I mean, to get it done, and this is a personal experience, but for me, first of all, one needs to know exactly what are the values where we stand. So in my case, what are my values? Am I happy or I'm not, or where I'm personally? And then when it goes to teams, for me, what's important is understand where they are, each of them, and what is their pressure, their stress, their mood. They have a good day, bad day. What's the stress they have, where they are? Because I have been in meetings where, there's no magic, there's no chemistry there, right? So it's like, what's happening here? And then when I have been able to just have a coffee with that person or just have a chat separately, after talking a bit, and when they open up, they say, actually, you know what, it's just, I had a bad experience in the past with someone in that team, or actually I had a lot of pressure, or I don't think this goes with my objectives. So I think once we are able to lower our barriers and open up and say, look, this is what's happening. I fear about my job might be losing, or I fear that I might not get a promotion, or I fear that I'm going to be valued in a different way, or that whatever happens in their mind of what might happen, that raises a barrier, a defense that is not good for collaboration. So I found that it's always good just to start being humble myself, and in a lot of meetings I'm the first one saying, by the way, I don't have the answer on this. That's why I need you to work with me, because I have no idea. And there has been a lot of projects where I say, and you know what, nobody has the answer. So let's give it a go.
That was perfect, because that was my follow-up question, which is more about the strategies to actually create that bond of trust. From what I understood in your job, you tend to hop from team to team a lot, because you work with one team to solve a problem, and then you jump to another team in a different department to solve a problem, or a different sourcing. So maybe you're sourcing something from Latin America, then from the United States or Asia. So you did work with different teams. What are your strategies to try to lower those barriers as fast as you can? You just said one that is great, which is I go in and I'm the first person to be humble and to say, I have no clue. What other things do you do, or do you think other people could do to kind of bring these barriers down?
So what I do is when I move to a new area and we have an ask of, okay, can you lay the strategy for the coming 3 years for this area? And it's like, well, how are we going to do that? And, it's those words that weight so much that suddenly you can see people on their shoulders say, we need to prepare the strategy, and it's going to go to the leadership team, boom, and that's going to be, it's going to be a measurement of your objectives for the year. And you can see people thinking, like, sinking, like, some people say, oh yeah, let's go for it. But it's just kind of like, let's park that for a moment. Like, look, guys, we have the strategy, but let's see where we are. This is who I am. I know about this, but I don't know about that. These are my objectives. But I think more than anything else, what I bring when I'm with the different teams, I go there and I'm very confident about myself. And I just give that reassurance and say, look, guys, this is who I am. You might think that I don't know a lot of things, and probably you're right, but that doesn't matter. He is not about who knows the most about everything, because that doesn't exist. It's about each of you have different skills that combined together, we create that jigsaw that is a full picture, right? So, because nobody has a big jigsaw under their arm. So just make them think, oh, that makes sense. Actually, you know what? That's what I know. Okay, great. Come on. And that's what I find is the best.
I love the analogy of the jigsaw. It's very visual, thinking of different people as different pieces of the jigsaw, or different skills, maybe not even different people. And the whole thing put together can solve the big problems. That's fabulous. And you were talking about strategy, and something that I'm curious, it's not extremely related to what we've been talking about so far, but one of the things that we want to do with the strategy factory is we want to kind of solve this, what we think is a misunderstanding, that strategy is something that management or that strategy consultants do. And actually strategy is something that everyone does every day. It's business as usual. It's what people do in procurement. It's what people do in supply chain or in branding. So when it comes to strategy in your teams, you were saying about building this strategy for 3 years. How do you then, so you write it down, you bring it back to the management team. What happens then? Because you are then executing that strategy and things change. How do you adapt? What is the revision process that you have, if there's any?
Well, the main thing about strategy is that you want to go from A to B. So first of all, you need to know where you want to go. It needs to be a very clear objective. And it's like you decide to drive or cycle or run to a place, right? Say, okay, I want to go there. What's my strategy? and if you take running as an example, which applies to a majority of people, say, okay, I'm going to be running at what speed? What speed I'm going to be running? What amount of food I need to bring with me or water, and what journey I'm going to take? So so the strategy is like building that kind of journey and thinking, okay, I need to plan everything. It's a big plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then the best strategy is when you think about what might go wrong or what you need to think and how flexible you can be. So if my strategy is like, that's it, and then the moment after the first minute something happens and I haven't prepared for it and I cannot adapt my plan, that strategy was just like bad. The strategy is based on it's a robust plan that has a degree of flexibility, and you can adapt as you go along. That's how I see it.
That's great. No, that's fabulous. That's fabulous. And I think kind of going into the last part of this conversation, as we talked before, this idea is to have a very succinct, to the point conversation. I'm happy to have more in the future. There's two more things that I want to talk about, and one is related to the supermarket industry, and how you see the supermarket industry changing in the last 10 years, because in my opinion, there's a lot that has changed already. I remember when I was young, it was all about huge supermarkets. So you would go once a week to a huge supermarket, you would buy your groceries, you go back home, and you would repeat the next week. And as I grew up, smaller supermarkets started to pop all over the place, and it was more about this idea of a convenience store where you could just go in, buy whatever you needed for that day, the next 2-3 days, and then repeat all over again. Smaller places, smaller fridges, smaller pantries. There's not enough space, or maybe there's not enough time. Or I don't own a car to do a whole grocery shopping for a family. Where do you see it going in the next 10 years? Do you think the online penetration is going to be kind of 100%? Do you think that people are going to still be shopping on stores? What is your imagination or the plan? I mean, I guess you have a plan for the future.
Well, it's completely kind of guessing what might be in the coming 10 years, but definitely what is true about going forward is that things will evolve quicker than before. So going back and say, okay, in the last 10 years, how things have changed. So therefore, in the coming 10 years, things will evolve quicker, but quicker doesn't mean radical changes. Like suddenly we're going to have supermarkets in the moon or something like that. No, it's not radical changes. You know, sometimes when you look at science fiction, they come with these sometimes crazy ideas. It's like, no, actually, sometimes some of the big inventions in life have come quite small. And I think supermarkets and retail in general, actually, the way it's going to come in the coming 10 years is there's going to be a lot of blur lines. So there's going to be kind of much more integration with other sectors. I think physical still will remain. Online will be there, obviously, but also the format, you're going to have big, you're going to have small. It's going to be a much more complex model. And generally speaking, retail, as we had in the past of, okay, you are a retailer for food, you are a retailer for household goods, you are a barber, you are a coffee shop, you are someone repairing cars. There's going to be an evolution where part of that is going to be start blending and blurring. Part is going to remain the same, but part is going to, so we're going to see an evolution and transition into a blur model, whatever it is, in some parts of the sector.
And who do you think are going to be then the winners, or who's going to win the race as these lines start to blur? Is it going to be the current players? Do you think there's going to be a surge of new players because it's going to be maybe easier to access? The barriers to entry are going to be lower?
Well, I think there are two people are going to win. First of all, the small companies backed by entrepreneurs, and they have the flexibility to adapt and do startups, and so those are going to be winning. Not all of them; a lot of them will fail, obviously, but some of them are going to be winning for sure. And then we think the big companies are going to be the ones that are prepared to risk and adapt. And from my experience, and I think it's out there in the press, as it has been published, Tesco is a company where looks at invest into the future. So there has been a few trials of different ways of bringing food to the customers, and even in the format. So there's that degree of innovation that is at the core of what's needed, and it requires a commitment actually from that company to say, look, we need to allocate a percentage of our profit to research and development. That in other industries like pharmaceuticals, like of course you have to do it, but in retail is the same. It should not be different. Innovation is just crucial going forward.
Awesome. And then I think my last question is unrelated to the supermarket industry, but it's still related to the future, which is where do you see our life and work balance or imbalance going in the next 10 years as well?
Yeah, I think the work-life balance or imbalance, as you say, going forward, I think it's about understanding how each of us are. So if someone hates change and don't want to change, find a way to live with that. So there's industries, ways of working, and roles that provide that security, stability. Even the way of living, you can find a place to live, or a country or an area, and that's great, because that gives happiness to those people that like to live that way with kind of complete security. Now, majority of people, I think, will have to live in quite insecure way or uncertain way, which is what happened. I think we need to start enjoying, as I do personally, actually, that I'm a big advocate about that, but start enjoying going with the flow of thinking, this is today. So what I have today, I'm going to enjoy today. For tomorrow, we'll see what will come. And look, at personal level, I like a lot of sports, and recently I've taken on surfing, which it was again part of the challenges of change, because it's like I'm not a 20-year-old, so like I say, well, I like going to see, why not? So I gave it a go, and it's just, as a spoiler, it's highly addictive actually. And one thing about surfing is that you don't know when you're going to get the right waves. You don't know when it's coming. And sometimes it's like, what, I'm just going to go there. I'm going to be waiting and enjoy that, enjoy interaction with other people, respect. And sometimes, do I catch a big wave and I have no idea? Do I sometimes manage to be even stand? Or something like, come on, I've just got so much in the water, I have enough. But it's like, do I crave for going for that? Go with the flow, see what happens. Absolutely. And in life and work is the same. Say, where you work today, where you live today, how you are today, it's precious. Enjoy it today. Where you're going to be working, living, doing, or having, or in 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, nobody knows. It might be the same or completely different, but be prepared for both. To be the same and enjoy, or be prepared to change.
Joan, I think this is a beautiful closure for this conversation. I really appreciate your time and your experience and everything you've shared. It's been wonderful, and I really hope maybe we can do a second part in the near future.
Sure, whenever you want. Yeah, it has been great to speak to you.
Joan, have a wonderful, wonderful day for you, afternoon for me, and I'll talk to you very soon.
Yeah, speak soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, bye.